And we're going to try and finish the 14th chapter of the third book of A Tale of Two Cities. The name of the chapter is The Knitting Done, and the name of the book is The Track of a Storm. Miss Pross and Mr. Cruncher are trying to figure out how they are going to escape the city after the Minets get out, and Cruncher has told Pross that he will meet her inside the door of the cathedral, and so Miss Pross is preparing, and all the while Madame Defarge draws closer. Afraid in her extreme perturbation of the loneliness of the deserted rooms and the half-imagined faces peeping from behind every open door in them, Miss Pross got a basin of cold water and began laving her eyes, which were swollen and red. Haunted by her feverish apprehensions, she could not bear to have her sight obscured for a minute at a time by the dripping water, but constantly paused and looked round to see that there was no one watching her. In one of those pauses she recoiled and cried out, for she saw a figure standing in the room. The basin fell to the ground broken, and the water flowed to the feet of Madame Defarge by strange, stern ways, and through much straining blood those feet had come to meet that water. Madame Defarge looked coldly at her and said, "The wife of Evrémonde, where is she?" It flashed upon Miss Pross's mind that the doors were all standing open, and would suggest the flight. Her first act was to shut them. There were 4 in the room, and she shut them all. She then placed herself before the door of the chamber which Lucy had occupied. Madame Defarge's dark eyes followed her through this rapid movement, and rested on her when it was finished. Miss Pross had nothing beautiful about her. Years had not tamed the wildness or softened the grimness of her appearance. But she, too, was a determined woman, in her different way, and she measured Madame Defarge with her eyes every inch. "You might, from your appearance, be the wife of Lucifer," said Miss Pross in her breathing. "Nevertheless, you shall not get the better of me. I am an Englishwoman." Madame Defarge looked at her scornfully, but still with something of Miss Pross's own perception that they too were at bay. She saw a tight-handed, wiry woman before her, as Mr. Lorry had seen the same figure of a woman with a strong hand in the years gone by. She knew full well that Miss Pross was the family's devoted friend. Miss Pross knew full well that Madame Defarge was the family's malevolent enemy. "On my way yonder," said Madame Defarge, with a slight movement of her hand toward the fatal spot, "where they reserve my chair and my knitting for me, I am come to make my compliments to her in passing. I wish to see her." "I know that your intentions are evil," said Miss Pross, "and you may depend upon it, I'll hold my own against them." Each spoke in her own language. Neither understood the other's words. Both were very watchful and intent to deduce from look and manner what the unintelligible words meant. "It will do her good to keep herself concealed from me at this moment. It will do her no good to keep herself concealed from me at this moment," said Madame Defarge. "Good patriots will know what that means. Let me see her. Go tell her that I wish to see her. Do you hear?" "If those eyes of yours were bedwinches," returned Miss Pross, "and I was an English four-poster, that shouldn't lose a splinter of me. No, you wicked foreign woman, I am your match." Madame Defarge was not likely to follow these idiomatic remarks in detail, but she so far understood them as to perceive that she was set at naught. "Woman, imbecile, and pig-like," said Madame Defarge, frowning, "I take no answer from you. I demand to see her. Either tell her that I demand to see her, or stand out of the way of the door and let me go to her." This with an angry explanatory wave of her right arm. "I little thought," said Miss Pross, "that I should ever want to understand your nonsensical language, but I would give all I have, to the clothes I wear, to know whether you suspect the truth or any part of it." Neither of them for a single moment released the other's eyes. Madame Defarge had not moved from the spot where she stood when Miss Pross first became aware of her, but now she advanced one step. "I am a Briton," said Miss Pross. "I am desperate. I don't care an English twopence for myself. I know that the longer I keep you here, the greater hope there is for my Lady Bird. And I'll not leave a handful of that dark hair upon your head if you lay a finger on me." Thus Miss Pross, with a shake of her head and a flash of her eyes, between every rapid sentence, and every rapid sentence a whole breath. Thus Miss Pross, who had never struck a blow in her life, but her courage was of that emotional nature that it brought the irrepressible tears to her eyes. This was a courage that Madame Defarge so little comprehended as to mistake for weakness. "Ha ha!" she laughed. "You poor wretch, what are you worth? I address myself to the doctor." She raised her voice and called out, "Citizen Doctor, wife of Evremond, child of Evremond, any person but this miserable fool, answer the Citizeness Defarge." Perhaps the following silence, perhaps some latent disclosure in the expression of Miss Pross's face, perhaps the sudden misgiving, apart from either suggestion, whispered to Madame Defarge that they were gone. 3 of the doors she opened swiftly and looked in. "These rooms are in disorder. There has been hurried packing. There are odds and ends upon the ground. There is no one in that room behind you. Let me look." "Never!" said Miss Pross, who understood the request as perfectly as Madame Defarge understood the answer. "If they are not in that room, they are gone, and can be pursued and brought back," said Madame Defarge to herself. "As long as you don't know whether they are in that room or not, you are uncertain what to do," said Miss Pross to herself. "And you shall not know that, if I can prevent you knowing it. And know that, or know not that, you shall not leave here while I can hold you." "I have been in the streets from the first. Nothing has stopped me. I will tear you to pieces, but I will have you from that door," said Madame Defarge. "We are alone, at the top of a high house in a solitary courtyard. We are not likely to be heard, and I pray for bodily strength to keep you here while every minute you are here is worth 100,000 guineas to my darling," said Miss Pross. Madame Defarge made at the door. Miss Pross, on the instinct of the moment, seized her round the waist in both her arms and held her tight. It was in vain for Madame Defarge to struggle and to strike. Miss Pross, with the vigorous tenacity of love, always so much stronger than hate, clasped her tight, and even lifted her from the floor in a struggle that they had. The 2 hands of Madame Defarge buffeted and tore at her face, but Miss Pross, with her head down, held her round the waist, and clung to her with more than the hold of a drowning woman. Soon Madame Defarge's hands ceased to strike, and felt at her encircled waist. "It is under my arm," said Miss Pross, in smothered tones. "You shall not draw it. I am stronger than you. I bless heaven for it. I hold you till one or the other of us faints or dies." Madame Defarge's hands were at her bosom. Miss Pross looked up, saw what it was, struck at it, struck out a flash and a crash, and stood alone, blinded with smoke. All this was in a second. As the smoke cleared, leaving an awful stillness, it passed out of the air, like the soul of a furious woman whose body lay lifeless on the ground. In the first fright and horror of her situation, Miss Pross passed the body, as far from it as she could, and ran down the stairs to call for fruitless help. Happily she bethought herself to the consequences of what she did, in time to check herself and go back. It was dreadful to go to the door again, but she did go in, and even went near it, to get the bonnet and other things that she meant to wear. These she put on, out on the staircase, first shutting and locking the door, and taking away the key. Then she sat down on the stairs a few moments to breathe and cry, and then she got up and hurried away. By good fortune she had a veil on her bonnet, or she could hardly have gone along the streets without being stopped. By good fortune, too, she was naturally so peculiar in appearance as not to show disfigurement like any other woman. She needed both advantages, for the marks of gripping fingers were deep on her face, and her hair was torn, and her dress, hastily composed with unsteady hands, was clutched and dragged 100 ways. In crossing the bridge, she dropped the door key in the river. Arriving at the cathedral some few minutes